That night in the village, a story by Ciro Discepolo. He had come there with one idea, to end it all. Life, ever since he'd quit his job, and since Tina's passing, had become so sad, so unbearable. Then this year his illness had come along, and all the lights had gone out. It was Anna and Enrico who had insisted he go there, to that touring club village in the Cilento area, overlooking the sea, between Cape Palinuro and Marina di Camerota. He'd said yes without conviction, now thinking that for what he'd decided to do, any place was as good as any. He'd descended, counting the steps from the apartments to the beach, lost in his thoughts. There were 98, unless you included 2 small rocky outcrops that weren't steps in the strictest sense. He reached the seashore, lost in thought, and didn't notice the 6 rows of umbrellas and deck chairs, a sea green color, neatly lined up 50 paces from the sea. His automatic progression prevented him from even distinguishing the colorful array of people presenting themselves before his eyes, mostly pale faces fresh off the Milan bus, others from last week, already beautifully golden in the sun, a few children frantically digging holes in the sand, and a few teenage girls a touch transgressive, exposing their small pointy breasts to the indulgent gazes of their neighbors under their umbrellas. He walked across the wooden planks that sloped steeply toward the sea, skirting the rows of umbrellas to the left, and headed toward a secluded corner of the beach, at the far right, toward the large rock that marks the edge of the strip of sand and sea from the beach of the next cove. He spread out the burgundy terrycloth towel with diagonal yellow stripes and sat down facing the sun, which was rapidly declining toward the west, roughly in the direction of Palinuro. The star, a pale orange at that moment, was setting after a hot August day, only intermittently swept by a light north wind that had made the preceding hours more bearable. He could hear the crash of the waves on the beach. That sea, now green, now blue, immense and impetuous that day, seemed to evoke the storms of his soul. Victor Hugo's words in Les Miserables came back to him. There is a spectacle greater than the sea, and that is the sky. There is a spectacle greater than the sky, and that is the interior of the soul. His at that moment represented a heterogeneous jumble of negative feelings, a mixture of anger, disappointment, disgust that showed him life as if through 2 dark Polaroid lenses, polarized to repel the light. Looking back, he saw his 67 springs with some bitterness, but steeped in 1,000 sweet memories. Then the last few months marked by the cruel hand of fate that had taken everything, and now left him alone with his despair. The tide was rising, and the water was coming ever closer to his feet, lapping that pebbly strip of shore that until a few minutes earlier had remained dry. He was moving away when he heard a female voice, clear and gentle, say, "May I take my newspaper back?" "Please excuse me, I hadn't noticed." He handed it back to her mechanically and raised his face just as she shifted slightly, standing with her back to the sun, revealing the fiery sphere of the star, which shone full on the old man's face. He was blinded, and for a few seconds could see nothing but a dark profile. Then, as his pupils adjusted to the light, he recognized the features of a woman of medium height, about his own age, slim, wearing a blue lycra one-piece swimsuit, low cut in the front and plunging in the back. Her deeply tanned skin had no visible wrinkles, and only a few horizontal lines on her forehead betrayed her age, along with the gray of her hair, pulled tightly back at the temples, and pulled back by a large, dark, camel-colored clip. He felt an instinctive sympathy for this woman he was seeing for the first time, but for a moment he no longer paid attention to her. He then began to follow the maneuvers of a surfboard with a white and blue sail that was cutting through the water quickly and parallel to the shore about 30 meters from it. The pilot's confident, rapid movements recalled the choreography of a South American dance, and the play of light, reflected in the wet sail, completed the scenic ensemble, which was very beautiful to see. He followed the young man's evolution with his eyes until the windsurfer became little more than a dot in the distance. Then, staring at the horizon, the melancholy thoughts from before returned, the ones that had haunted him for the past few months. He told himself he was in the wrong place, in the midst of life, surrounded by so many people having fun and wanting to live, while he, on the other hand, wanted only to die. He gathered his things, placing them in the gray plastic bag and zipping it up, slid the handles over his right shoulder, resting the back of his hand on his collarbone. He climbed the stairs slowly, pausing every few steps to catch his breath, and let those who were going up or down faster than him pass. He reached the showers and let a warm, almost cool jet of water hit him, which was a great relief after the heat of that day, spent partly driving on the scorching asphalt. Later, dried off and dressed, he automatically got in line at the restaurant for dinner, and turning around noticed the woman from the beach next to him, who greeted him with a warm and sincere smile that clearly didn't mean anything by it. He responded with a shy nod, a little rudely as he usually did when someone approached him unexpectedly. His exterior made him seem a bit bearish to those who didn't know him well, but inside he was very sensitive and impressionable. So many delicious foods were contained in heated containers, lined up in front of him, and as he passed by with the tray, he had to point to the ones he liked. He used to care a lot about food and would have greatly enjoyed that good dinner after a day of fasting. He chose panette Calabrian style, whose aroma of chili pepper mixed with tomato sauce and herbs could be detected, and veal tenderloin with buttered green beans. He decided that for today he might as well not worry about cholesterol. As he lifted the tray with the plates and the jug of wine and looked for a seat in the dining room, the woman next to him said, "There are 2 seats over there at the third table." He walked over without answering and took a seat across from her. "My name is Stefano," he said, sitting down. "And I'm Piera," the woman replied, following the fashion of villages where surnames are banned, and if there's no informal address, there's at least the familiarity of calling each other and knowing each other only by their first names. "I've been here since last Friday, but I only saw her today. In fact, I arrived this afternoon, but I won't stay. I'll only be staying a few days." "It's the first year I've come to a village," the woman continued with a smile. "You know, I'm recently widowed, and the children are grown up now." "Yes," he said, and thought of that serenity that contrasted with her condition, so similar to his own, on an existential level. They ate and exchanged a few words, but she did most of the talking. She told him a little about her life, her past pains, her great passion for reading, her faith. Maybe that's why she can smile despite everything, the old man thought. I don't even have that to support me. I just have a great emptiness inside. He mentally retraced the last years of his life, since he had become old. At 40, the meat he ate got stuck in the spaces between his teeth, and when he asked his dentist how long the discomfort would last, the dentist replied, "Forever." He had grown old, but despite that he had still lived with such determination, until that year, when fate took away Tina, his job, everything. Those in Milan talked about a ceiling to reach, a 5-year plan to stick to, sales trends. He no longer felt like it. He'd stepped aside. He couldn't stand the fight to destroy the competition any longer. If he'd laughed, someone else would have cried. This logic seemed to him like that of the jungle, of the biggest beast devouring the smallest. Competition, as it was understood today, was nothing more than the ancient motto, "Mors tua vita mea," and at that price he no longer wanted to stay in the race. The struggle for survival could have meaning for those forced to hunt for a living or fish, like old Santiago, who struggles for days desperately against the huge fish in Hemingway's greatest novel. But today, in 1987, in the industrial metropolises where suits and ties are supposed to represent civilization, the end of oppression, of need, a truce in the struggle. No, the decision had been made. He would soon leave this vale of tears. As he thought this, his eyes were once again lit up by Piera's smile as she asked him to join them in the entertainment show. They sat in the 4th row among other members, farther back from the area occupied by the children running around the dance floor. The 2 large 80-watt speakers blasted music for the little ones, while the staff set the stage for the show, which would begin at 9:30 p.m. The dance floor, paved with rectangular orange terracotta tiles, stretched across a surface of about 40 by 15 meters, surrounded by large, centuries-old olive trees that during the day provided cool shade for those less fond of the sun and sea. Behind the dance floor were terraces of land that sloped down to the sea, 70 meters below. In front and to the sides, 5 rows of chairs held the approximately 400 guests of the village, some of whom were busy carrying mineral water to the huts or making phone calls to the 2 booths behind the bar. Across them, a starry sky was visible at that moment because the dance floor lights were off, and the moon was in its first quarter, low on the western horizon. Piera had worn a light black gabardine skirt and a red silk blouse with white buttons at the front. A gold cord with an ivory pendant hung at her neckline, revealing her still smooth tanned skin. On her left arm, bare to the elbow like her right, was a small gold watch with a light leather strap. A strong but not overpowering perfume enveloped her, completing the very pleasant ensemble that, for the first time, Stefano looked at as a woman. He didn't want to admit it, but he liked her. She made him relive old sensations, jolted him out of his pessimistic torpor, and threatened to make him make plans. At my age, he thought, I'd be ridiculous. However, who knows by what confluence of thought he replayed in his mind the scene of the senile love between those 2 old men from the film The Night of San Lorenzo by the Taviani brothers. It had been beautiful, full of tenderness, and had shown how 2 beings can love each other even at a no longer youthful age, without arousing any hilarity, but rather emotion. Interrupting that thought were Nino Rota's music from Fellini's Otto e Mezzo, the opening theme of the evening entertainment at the village. The searchlight illuminated the center of the dance floor, and a young man in his early 30s appeared, dressed in an elegant blue silk shirt and shiny black trousers. He welcomed the new guests and then proceeded to sing, live, some very popular songs from the 1960s and 1970s. His voice was quite beautiful, and he easily earned a round of applause, especially from the older guests who cheered him on by name. "Come on, Renato, more!" And he didn't need to be asked twice, even granting a few requests from the audience, after consulting the director to see if they had the backing track for that song or that. When he struck the first notes of Volere, there was a huge round of applause, and many joined in, clapping their hands in rhythm. Then the dance contest was announced, and while the older guests hid their heads behind the new ones, some were invited to take to the dance floor and wear a number under their t-shirt or shirt. So he found himself among them, dragged along by Piera, who seemed unconcerned by the spotlight, the stares, or the likely gaffes they would make together. "I don't know if I'm capable, it's been so many years," Stefano said, trying to dodge the offer, but she gently tugged at his arm and with a smile erased the worries from his face. "You'll see, they're very lenient here." The man brought the number that identified the couple, and they got 9. Renato, the entertainer, explained that they could abstain from dancing one piece, but they could play a joker for the dance they felt strongest in, which would earn them double points. The jury, composed entirely of guests, took their places in the front row. The signal was given, and the first notes of a waltz echoed across the brightly lit, fairly loud space among the trees, amidst an attentive audience not yet inclined to admiration or irony. A few couples, especially the 5 and 6, performed very well, elegantly following the notes of the record, performing numerous stunts, and continually offering the audience a different side of themselves to observe. There were also a few clumsy ones who stumbled and got in the way of the lady, disrupting the harmony of the music and causing some laughter among the audience, which was quickly silenced by the entertainers' indulgent and encouraging comments. "It's a game, we're here to have fun." Stefano, a mediocre rider, did his best not to draw attention to himself, and, a little dazed by those fast turns to which he was no longer accustomed, was comforted by the end of the piece. They were still close side by side, and he could smell her perfume, the scent of her cologne mingling with the scent of the shower gel and the more intense scent of her skin. Stefano liked it, but he also decided he didn't feel like continuing the effort, there at the center of attention, starting to sweat, and with a spirit unsuited to those light-hearted activities that no longer thrilled him. He asked her to leave and once again was surprised by her sincere willingness. They slipped away at the right moment and headed toward the sea, as if they had spoken beforehand but without having uttered a single word. They had been descending the stairs for a while when they both noticed they were silent, but they remained at ease. This pleased Stefano greatly, as he preferred silence to words. On the beach there were only 3 guests rigging a boat for lampara fishing. One of them had donned a black rubber wetsuit that covered his entire torso down to his knees. A light north wind had begun to gently whip the air again, bringing them the scent of olive trees that mingled with the scent of the sea, almost calm at that moment. Everything was soft and quiet, occasionally broken by the distant sounds of village music that, depending on the wind, brought them the joy of that crowd. "Don't you like being with people?" he asked as they stopped a few steps from the shore. "Not today, not these days. There are moments when silence is better than being among others." "I think I understand. But what makes you so sad?" He wanted not to answer, considering the pointlessness of their conversation. He looked at the silvery reflections of the moon on the water and listened for a moment to the rumble of the waves breaking on the shore. I think he said that life has become useless to me. I no longer have interests, ambitions, or loved ones to cherish. Before me lies only the irreversibility of a lonely old age, a long, dark tunnel leading to death. I believe, she replied, that it's just a bad time. Sometimes heavy clouds pass over everyone's head, but then the clear sky returns. What seems eternal is only fleeting, and the sun follows the rain like spring follows winter. This death that you carry inside and that you can see on your face can be fought. It's called depression. Sometimes a few milligrams of benzodrine can be enough. No, drugs can't give us what life denies us. And why not drugs or alcohol then? The woman looked at him for a moment in silence, not knowing how to respond to these words or believing an answer was obvious. She too was at the final stage of her life's journey. She too had paid a high price for life. But unlike him, she had hope. She still believed in tomorrow, in men, in feelings. Her voice became softer, more feminine and almost whispering. She asked him, "Don't you believe in love?" "No." "Why?" "Because I think that at the root of everything there are simply many selfishnesses, many small, large, or very great selfishnesses that confront each other. I believe in the ancient saying homo homini lupus. Man is a wolf to man, man devours his fellow man. Each person loves himself above all else. The rest is hypocrisy, pretense, demagoguery. We should educate children from their earliest school years to fend for themselves, to do without others. Instead, they are told that there is love, brotherhood, friendship. But have you ever known true love, not conditioned by sensual passion or the complicity of an agreement to brave the perils of fate together rather than alone? I don't think you're as cynical as you'd like us to believe, she added, her voice becoming even more caressing. I think you express yourself this way because you've recently experienced great pain and haven't had enough time to let the wound heal. Perhaps, he replied distractedly and began to follow with his gaze the low flight of a seagull that glided toward the sea, banking on one side and then regaining altitude with short, intense wing beats. In the distance, the music of the racetrack could still be heard, and much fainter, the screeching of tires from some car taking the big curve awkwardly on the main road to Sapri before entering the village. Seen like this, standing in front of the sea with a serious face and a gaze lost in thought, the man had a certain charm, even if not being handsome. From the shirt, open at the top 4 buttons, you could see his hairless chest and a 20-year-old stomach that betrayed his detachment from pleasures and perhaps something else. An illness? Perhaps. Was that, Pierre thought. What tormented him so? She felt, could have helped him, could have been close to him, could have cared for him. She felt, ever since she had seen him that afternoon, that something had happened inside her. Something magical, like so many years before. There had been no premeditation or plan whatsoever. She was simply attracted to that man, and, she thought, perhaps she wasn't indifferent to him either. But how could she pull him from the depths of those dark thoughts of hers? Can you ever make someone who isn't thirsty desire water? And then who was to tell her she wasn't mistaken, that it wasn't all a delusion, a kind of little enchantment born with the complicity of that wonderful night? She stared at him, standing next to him a little further back, to the right. He sensed it, and turned around, meeting her eyes with his. They looked at each other for a moment that seemed very long. There was neither proposal nor renunciation in them. They simply felt very close. Then he lowered his gaze, and the superego regained rigid control of his feelings. His internal censorship had returned to function, and the grid of feelings had resumed harnessing the forces within that intermittently struggled with reason, with the man who was becoming hard, who every day more resembled a misanthrope, with death in his heart, with this overwhelming desire to disappear, to throw in the towel on the square of life. Suddenly he shook himself. For a moment he didn't understand. Then he realized that something soft and rigid had bumped into his leg. It was a rubber ball as big as an open palm, yellow with small red patterns. A little girl who might have been 3 years old or younger was chasing her, dressed in a pink cotton dress with straps made of pink ribbon. She was wearing no shoes, and her face had a line, the optimistic tenacity with which children imbue even the most banal tasks with importance. 10 paces behind, a man and a woman were coming in that direction, presumably the little girl's parents. She stopped in front of Stefano and looked at him, raising her face significantly as the ball had come to a stop right in front of him, stuck in a hollow in the sand. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Paola!" the little girl replied decisively, already displaying strong communication skills. Then Stefano bent down, bending slightly at the knees, and taking the ball offered it to her. She, after grabbing it with both hands, dropped it, and then chased after it, hitting it with the instep of her foot. She walked away from where she had come. "Why don't we sit down for a few minutes?" Piera said. He did so without answering, and the woman settled next to him, almost pressed against her. "Don't you have any little grandchildren?" she asked him again, breaking his thoughtful silence. "No, my daughter didn't want any. I think I would have liked it, but more out of selfishness. Then I think about the baby food to prepare, the diapers to change, the 1,000 tasks every grandparent faces in times of emergency, and I tell myself that, all things considered, it was better this way." The woman looked at him, almost scrutinizing him, as if trying to learn his most intimate secrets, and asked, "So there's nothing that interests you, that makes you want to get up in the morning to start a new day? A pleasure, I don't know, a hobby, an old habit, an interest that could become more substantial?" Stefano was about to automatically answer no, but then he stopped to think for a moment. Indeed, something had been troubling his pessimism for a few hours. It was a faint torch in a dark cave that illuminated, with a reddish pallor, only one small side of the cavern. This light was a tiny promise in a galaxy of threats. He could no longer hide it from himself. He was falling in love. That woman attracted him. Something had clicked that he couldn't quite define, but he liked it. That could become a positive feeling. She noticed that something was changing, that the aura of electricity around him was fading, that the man was emerging, that humanity was manifesting itself. "Why don't you let go a little?" she asked him, and gently placed his hand on the back of hers, while her eyes, more with certainty than hope, met his. It was an instant. He curled his fingers and squeezed it. Ciro Discepolo, Naples, 1987.